Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tate for the very first episode in our new retrospective series. This is, of course, the James Cameron Retrospective, where we're going to be going through all of his films, beginning with Piranha II, The Spawning, and ending with Titanic, purely because we've done the Avatar films across, I say, last year in
Mm.
December, and obviously the remaster in September. So we're going to be diving into his filmography, some of the films he's done, the ones he's directed, not including his documentaries. And we are here on the very first episode. But before we get into any of that sort of stuff, Tate, how are we doing today?
Yeah, doing good. Out here once again in Austria. Every single year I come out here and go out here to work, and it means that we can say we're an international channel at least, streaming from both here in the UK. So yeah, ready to review some more films.
Yes, definitely. And by the time this comes out, it will be 2023, and we will have done our New Year stream. So we hope all the announcements have gone down well. And if you don't know about this, you can check that out in the video. And with it being a new year, there's a lot of things happening on the channel: new series, new franchises. We might have new guests popping up as well. And this series is going to be a great way to kickstart the year, where we can bring in some of those guests, familiar faces, both new and old. But we want to hear from you firstly in the comments. So comment below your thoughts on Piranha 2 This Morning. Comment if you've actually seen this film. I'd be really curious for people's thoughts that have, because when we talk about this is going to be quite something talking about the film. Maybe not the film, maybe the making of the film it could be a better film than the film itself. So please do get involved. And if you want to find us on our social medias, you can get us on Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinema savvy. And we've got a link to Redbubble where you can pick up some merch in the description below. But before we get into this, before we talk about our memories maybe with James Cameron, I'm going to very quickly bring up the schedule for the James Cameron retrospective. As we've kind of said, it's a shorter series. We're going to be kickstarting it today. Every Wednesday, we're going to have a review up. And then we're going to end it with a live stream on Sunday, the 12th of February for Titanic, mainly because it will be out in 4K at cinemas that weekend. So you can have people talking about seeing it with its brand new remaster. But that is the schedule. Screenshot that. Do how you please with it.
Hmm.
Whatever you fancy. They're the films we're covering: Piranha, The Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, T2, True Lies, and Titanic. And as I said, avatars have been done. The James Cameron Retrospective playlist, you can find our avatar reviews on there. So if you are curious, do check them out if you want to hear our thoughts on the new one. The time of recording, it's just surpassed
Hmm.
$1.1 billion at the box office. By the time this episode comes out, I'm assuming it would have overtook Top Gun Maverick. So, yeah, James Cameron, he knows how to print money. And that's something we'll be talking about in these retrospectives week to week. But the first one's going to be the weirdest one because there's not as much to talk about with respect to legacies, box office, Oscars, all that sort of stuff. So we're going to go through that schedule a little bit later on. But even before that, what we do to all our guests, like we did with the Spielberg series from last year, Tate, your first memory of potentially a James Cameron film, or a moment you remember or something. I'm curious to hear yours if you can remember, because I think he's a very different director to Spielberg in that respect. But I feel that everyone's going to have different stories still.
So I don't remember watching any of like his Terminator films when I was younger. I remember that being kind of something that my dad introduced me to a little bit later on. I'm pretty sure the earliest memory of any James Cameron film for me was, Titanic. Actually, I'm pretty sure my parents had a copy on, I think it was VHS or something like that, and I remember watching it. I remember not liking it at all, quitting halfway through and crying. So, that's my earliest memory of that film, at least. But trying to think back on James Cameron films and stuff like that, it's really difficult. I've always thought he's done more than this. He's done more than this many films, and especially maybe coming off the back of the Spielberg one, like where he's done so many films. Cameron hasn't done many films, but the films that he's done, all of them are memorable in their own way. Maybe not this film, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, and I think kind of coming off the back of that, was it 3 films in 25 years he's done, which is insane when you compare it to Spielberg, where he probably has done like 20 films in 25 years or something extreme. And I think that's what's going to make this exciting, that with his career, for anyone curious at home, when you think of the Avatar films, you think of the cinema experience, you think of the new technologies that he helps not just use, he develops them himself. He's got all his environmental stuff. So aside from film, he's quite political in that respect. And he's always been a pioneer. And it's something I didn't probably get to know as much till, I'd say, like across last year, when I was just learning a bit more as I do about certain technologies that a lot of stuff backtracks to James Cameron, and I think certainly Terminator 2 and the Abyss I've not seen is going to be two where that probably really kicks in. But the way we'll do it with this one, we're going to do the IMDb plot synopsis for Piranha 2 this morning. This is going to be the weirdest one because I guess the discussion is going to be on did he direct this or not. But for those curious, and we are classifying it as a James Cameron film, as it is classified as a James Cameron film, no matter how much he
His
takes his
name is
name off it.
all over the advertising for it, so he kind of has to take responsibility.
Yeah. And over the years, he went from having nothing to do with it to admitting he has something to do with it to then going off it again. So we're going to try and get into that for you all. But the IMDb plot synopsis: a scuba diving instructor, her biochemist boyfriend, and her police chief ex-husband tried to link a series of bizarre deaths to a mutant strain of piranha fish, whose lair is a sunken freighter ship off a Caribbean island resort. That's one way to put it. Tay, I'm going to put you on the spot with the memories here. Now, I'm not going to ask you if you've watched the first Piranha film, but I certainly think for our generation, did you see Piranha 3D or Piranha 3DD in the was it late noughties? Because I remember being at school when those came out and everyone was watching them. So I know he didn't direct that Piranha 2, but I guess we could say that they were very different films, but similar in the same vein. Have you seen them? Because they were like the moment films that people saw, and there's no hiding from that.
Funnily enough, without knowing, James Cameron directed this, without knowing that Piranha was even a franchise in the first place, I wouldn't know at all that there was Piranha films outside of the Piranha 3D, 3 Double D because of the advertising. I've never seen them. I actively avoided them, actually. Just out of, just being a film snob, if anything. Like, not wanting to watch, trash films, knowing that they're trash films and stuff like that. So, yeah, no, I haven't seen them.
So I think the first one came out in 2009. So I was 13, and you got to think that's like prime, like Michael Bay age of being a fan of that sort of thing. And I remember it being a big deal. So I definitely remember Piranha 3D. I remember the Kelly Brook was in that. I can't remember much more than that, if I'm being honest. But the fact there were piranhas that would just eat people, and because it was 3D, this was the pre-Avatar 3D of wearing the actual paper glasses, and they just have piranhas lashing at the screen. But when it came to doing this series, I didn't think. I mean, certainly in that Piranha film, I don't remember them flying, and this obviously wasn't the case. I don't think there's a Piranha 3 poster spawning. I didn't watch Piranha 1 before this. I probably will watch Alien before Aliens, though, because that's different. That's a great film. But I just wanted to say that because it's a very strange one of these, and it doesn't strike me as the kind of series that you can imagine being rebooted, but it kind of made sense as to why they did. They obviously had a ridiculous director that wanted to do it. They wanted to cash in, and they knew what they wanted to do. And heading into this film, I knew nothing about this. All I knew was that James Cameron directed it. I know that there was some issues with him, again, directing it and not directing it. But aside from that, I couldn't tell you any actors. I couldn't have told you what it was about. I couldn't have even told you that the piranhas were flying in it. It took me half a film to really clock that they were doing that. But what about you? Did you know anything? Because I know you saw this before me as well.
Yeah, I knew nothing about this. The only thing that I did know was that it had flying fish in it. And I know that it's also called, was it Flying Killers in some places and stuff like that? Like, it's not just called Piranha the Spawning. Some places it's called Flying Killers, or sometimes it's called Piranha Part 2, the Spawning. So, apart from that, cheesy film, terrible. I've seen it on many top 10 lists for worst films of all time, and a lot of lists as well of, you won't believe this director directed this as their first film kind of thing. So, no, I didn't really know much about it going into it at all.
No, that's absolutely fair. And I think what we'll do following through this, we're going to go through the behind the scenes. So this is quite something. I have here a book, and I don't normally. Basically, there's a lot of research that's being done for this series at my end, and I picked up a really good James Cameron book called Tech Noir. It's all of his artwork. It's got him. I didn't realize it's not autobiographical, but it's not just his artwork. It's him talking about those films, the artwork and his background. I thought, you know what, it'll be nice to try and actually find something about Piranha. And I kid you not, in what I'm going to assume is a 500, 400 page book, there are 2 paragraphs on Piranha 2. And if you want to know how it went, The only thing you need to realize is that paragraph 2 begins with, I was listed as the director of Piranha 2, but only because I didn't have an attorney who could take my name off it. Um, there's a lot of swearing if I carry on, but that is the one killer line if you really want to know. He even mentions the fact that Sting rejected playing Car Reese because of that in Terminator, which I'll talk about in the Terminator one. But yeah, so that's going to do it for that tidbit there. But it's interesting that this has a background of him saying he's involved and he's not. And if you actually delve into some of the research, which is quite fascinating, a lot of this stems from the producer, Ovidio Giasantis, who at the time made a deal with Warner Brothers. He had a budget of $500,000. However, as part of the contract for that, he had to have an American direct the film. Now, this guy wanted to direct the film himself. So he went for someone at a low level that he'd done in his previous work, not Galaxy Terror. Galaxy Terror is what James Cameron had done. Because he was impressed by that, he brought in James Cameron to move from VFX into directing. And after 5 days, he sacked him. But what was remarkable inside of those 5 days, what James Cameron didn't know, I'll delve into that a little bit later when we talk about the director stuff. But it's really interesting that, not that this kind of thing happens, but I guess for 1982, $500,000, like, obviously it's way more than, what 500K is now.
Yeah.
But the premise of that's not that much. But what I'm more intrigued by is the fact that it was so black and white, as it has to be an American director. And obviously this guy just booted him off the moment he got the chance to.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I know that we we could talk about this film's plot for a very short amount of time. We probably will at some point, but we could honestly talk about the behind the scenes of this film for hours. Like, there is so much going on here, and for it to be specifically an American director needed, and for him to just pick James Cameron and this be his first film and stuff like that, it's absolutely fascinating. And yeah, like you said, especially with all of the stuff that he actually managed to do with, the 5 days that he had and stuff like that, it does bring up the debate, is it his film or not? It's a fascinating one. Where do you fall on that, by the way?
To me, I mean, I'm learning more every passing day since watching it. His name is attached to it, so there has to be some credit of him directing it. But as long as it reminds me of, I know, a more modern thing, and I hate bringing up Snyder stuff, but on the Joss Whedon version of the Justice League, Joss Whedon was not credited as the director. It was still credited as Zack Snyder, but we all knew that wasn't his film. So I'm kind of in that mindset that, yes, it's your film, but at the same time, it's not. It does use your footage, but it
Yeah.
also uses footage that you didn't do, and you didn't edit it. And if we kind of segue into the behind the scenes, into the direction as well, what's fascinating about James Cameron over the last few months of research, certainly around Avatar, seeing how not just involved he is in filmmaking, that different directors have different levels of involvement. Some will just go on set, they'll sit in their unit with the cameras, they'll watch the recording. Some will have the camera in their hands, they'll help on cinematography. Some will be dressing the set. Every director has a different approach. And James Cameron just completely caught me off guard with some of the stuff I've learned. For example, the poster for this film, he drew.
Mm.
He used to be an artist. Makes sense why he released an art book, if I'm being honest. I'm assuming he also drew the photo in Titanic, which I'll find out in a few weeks. But what's interesting is that when he was hired, he came to this island where they were filming. And apparently, when he turned up, they hadn't even been doing any pre-production. There'd been no scouting. There was nothing. So as soon as he got to the island, he took the production wallet, he took a camera, and he just started scouting locations himself. He paid for all of the scouting himself. He paid for the locations to be rented. He clearly saw this as his opportunity to direct. And it's a real shame that after 5 days, they've sacked him from it because they've wanted to take over. He did the storyboards all himself. He then followed that up alongside doing the storyboards as doing some of the special effects. He redid the scripts. It's hard because the clear final product isn't his film.
Yeah.
But he's clearly behind a lot of it. And then I guess the question goes to, without diving too far ahead, that there is a director's cut that was released at one point on Laserdisc, not modern formats. And that's meant to be very different. Does it improve the film? Probably not. but I just think he was probably doomed on the logic of this was his first film, in the same way that Fincher has that attached to Alien 3, right? Fincher was brought on board for Alien 3, but he would
Yeah,
tell everyone it's not his film, it's a studio film. I'm in this mindset that for this at least, I don't think this is James Cameron's fault. What I would say is that anything that could be deemed as decent, the fact that they're shooting on an island might be down to the fact that he did the location scan himself. So
possibly.
it's clear from an early indication that he was very hands on. And was he hands on because he had such a terrible experience with this film, or was he hands on because that's the way he was always going to go? It. What are your kind of thoughts on that? Knowing he's been far more involved than they let him on to believe.
I just find it interesting because you can tell straight away going from VFX into directing that he's already got that kind of hard graft of a director, knowing what his end product wants to be and stuff like that. And I know that we've got a section here which is like any signature traits that come up or anything like that, anything that, he would later on use in his career. And outside of the underwater stuff, no. I guess you could say the production, if he's taken it all onto his hands, he was able to do so much in that kind of small span. And yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big questions moving forward for this episode as well. I mean, if we talk about the direction itself, we're both in agreement that this isn't a good film. Just getting that out there now, if you hadn't figured that out by now.
Oh, it is awful. It is genuinely dreadful. Like, if we want to talk, I mean, do we want to go into a bit of the story now, or we want to stick to directions?
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna talk about his directing, but let's talk the story because we mentioned
Mm.
that synopsis earlier, and you kind of said it before we hit record that there's more to this synopsis than there probably is in the actual 2 hour film. And it reeks of not even a B. You get those good B films back in the day where they're lower budgets, they're a bit crap, but they're entertaining. At no point is this ever entertaining. At no point do I ever care for any characters in the film. I'm going to go as far as say that none of the characters we're told we have to like are likable themselves, bar maybe Anne, who isn't really billed as the lead. And that's where I'm kind of lost in this. That I'm because not even saying I'm invested in characters. I just don't like anyone. And in a horror film, you at least want to root for someone. And I can't even call
Mm.
this a horror because it's so bad. It's not even funny. It's just on this new level of terrible. And following through that, I can understand why James Cameron doesn't want his name. Like, if this was a great
Mm.
film that he was sacked off for 4 days, and this producer made a wonderful film, he would always say this was his film, irrespective of what happened and what didn't happen. But you can understand why James Cameron doesn't want to be attached to this. But it then again makes me think if he ended up rewriting this into what it became, how bad was that first draft before he was involved?
Oh, honestly, like this film, whilst watching it, all it reminded me of was 1941. But if they actually tried to make the film serious, like it's that bad. It's that kind of level of bad. Bad acting. I want to say also bad directing. Like it's not very well directed at all. It's just awful. There's no joy in this film. I get joy out of watching bad movies sometimes, like The Room and just other films like that, because at least there's something there, like to latch onto. At least it's like, oh wow, it's so bad, it's unintentionally funny. This film's just bad. It's just so bad. It was really hard to kind of keep paying attention to it, on kind of keeping track of who the characters are, what their
Yeah.
motivations are, what they're doing, and stuff like that. Because you're just drawn into this boring ass film that feels way longer than it actually is. And yeah, it's maddening how poorly put together it was. And I know it's all the production side of things and stuff like that, but still bad.
No, I'm fully with you. And kind of in time that we talk about some of the characters now, me and you were chatting before again, like when I was listing them, I thought certain characters were actually the other characters they were because I can't remember anyone's name at all. All I can remember is the mom, the dad, the new boyfriend, and the son. And that's how I viewed it. But
The
we've
fish.
got
I liked the fisherman, but he
yes,
died. So
but also you couldn't remember his name. And there's I don't like using the word their names aren't memorable because that's become one of the Avatar criticisms, right? Is that no one remembers the name of the Navi. And what's really interesting is I know we're on week 1 of doing this series, but the big conversation with Avatar like a month ago was, Avatar has no cultural impacts, but then its sequel was already one of the highest grossing films in history. And I love this Avatar discussion, and kind of I've said before that I was on not the wrong side of it, but I was in that sarcastic, not snobby attitude, but no one talks about Avatar. But actually, it's because James Cameron's a madman and developed 4 Avatar films at the same time to come out 2 years apart from each other. Because why not? He says. But with this is where I'm truly lost. So Chris is the son, who is, I wouldn't even say the lead character of this film, but he's introduced as the lead character of the film.
Yeah,
We
he
have
kind of disappears for like half of it, doesn't he?
half the film. He's just
Yeah.
there at a raft at the end for no reason, and
Yeah, like how did
there's
he?
no
Yeah.
there's no tension, no nothing, and you know he's going to be fine because he's the son of the lead, and the character Anne, played by Trisha O'Neill, who I thought was the best thing in this. And when I say was the best thing in this, I'm not here to sort of go into like people's acting ability or anything like that. She's the lead character. She has the most screen time, and to her credit, she's the only character that I feel has any kind of character development as a whole. You know, you introduce her as the single mom type. We get to meet, you know, who the real father is, their divide and their issues. But of course, like many films, it's about parents reconnecting to their kids. So
Mm.
I don't mind Anne in the film. I just didn't like anyone else. Like even Lance Henriksen, who pops up in a few of the James Cameron films, who has had an incredible career post Piranha 2, who was almost the Terminator, who we'll talk about next week. His name's Steve Kimbrough. I couldn't remember his name. I just knew he was the cop, and he's a terrible policeman. It's like the mayor in Jaws that tells people to go on the beach. These people are getting massacred. He's like, no, just carry on.
All the characters have very stupid motivations and very stupid things, and like I said, it feels like a spoof movie on how bad it is, but there's no
Yeah.
jokes and no formula put in there.
No, and that's kind of what I'm with you. There's nothing in there. There's nothing to take you into it, and the characters are just as two-dimensional as they come. Now, I guess what we could say in a nice thing is that clearly James Cameron enjoyed working with Lance Henriksen, hence him coming back. But Trisha O'Neill, we know, has a role in Titanic. We don't know the name of that role, but she appeared in it. But none of the other characters, and I think once you realise that these piranhas themselves have wings, which it's a
Mm.
pretty insane things to do. You
They've
then
been
in turn,
genetically engineered by the military.
yeah, and I think I'm lost there. I just thought it would be a swarm of piranhas. Like I think that's what Piranha 3D was. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just thought that was a reboot of the other ones. But these are military piranhas that don't make logistical sense. Oh, they just fell out of a tube in the ocean. I can deal with a lot of nonsense for horror films,
Mm.
but just the way this was, it just didn't make. No, I don't. I'm not asking for logical
Also,
sense in a film about
they
piranhas.
don't go for the meaty parts of the body. They go for the neck.
Yeah, and it's like one bite and they kill you. And I was like, the whole point of piranhas is like they just devour everyone. And I don't know how they'd work. Like if you, and I don't want to apply logic to this film, but if these were being developed by the military, right? If you had a machine gun and there were piranhas flying at you from a distance, you'd see them coming. I don't know how the military would, or if you had a flamethrower, and I don't like applying logic to a film
Yeah.
this logical, but I was just sort of sat there saying, there's, again, you know, I don't think it's a James Cameron fault. I don't know how late on board he was brought onto this. Was
Mm.
he brought on board or like a week before the filming started and had to rewrite that script? But it feels to me like this is one of those atrocious. What was it like? Jaws? You know, after Jaws 2, there was loads
Yeah.
of other Jaws films, right? And it was let's have these horrors from the sea, but let's make them ridiculous. I think one of the Jaws films, like it's the mother of Jaws or something really strange. Like
Yeah.
it was its mother all along. I'm never going to watch that because it's got sharks in it, but I don't understand the logic for a lot of things like this, and I feel this a piranha that off the back of Jaws, did they go into, you know, was there a tortoise murdering film? Was there a whale murdering film? It feels like everyone was probably jumping on the trend after Jaws, and what these producers would do is they would grab these directors who aren't directors. Again, in case James Cameron, he went on to be an incredible director, but I wonder how many dozens of films like Piranha 2 where it killed that person's career overnight that was directing it. And it happens
Mm.
today with modern films. You've had moments where you've had like VFX people or like script writers or producers suddenly take the director's chair, and you'll never see them do another film again because of how bad that outcome has ended up being. And it feels the same in this. And kind of segueing into the score, I don't have much to say except the fact I'm happy there's a score because it meant
Yes.
I could do an intro for the video. It's a very weird jazz score, though. I don't get
Yeah,
why
it
it's so
did not
upbeat.
fit the film even slightly. It's like a lot of the elements of this film have just been smashed together for some strange reason. They just don't fit. Like,
Yeah, and I just I'm a bit lost, not with the score, but it was weird, but it was nice to do an intro, so I'm going to thank them for that. But what's an interesting fact is obviously with the Spielberg series, it essentially doubled up as a John Williams retrospective.
yeah,
In this one, uh, most of his career, James Cameron has been either had Brad Fiedel, not the goalkeeper, Brad Fiedel, the composer, or James Horner do the scores. So we're not gonna, have one composer for most of it, but this is one of the 2 or 3 films not scored by them.
mm,
Because I don't know if that includes Avatar 2 or not, as the one of the 2 he didn't do. So it's one of 2 or 3 films that either of those didn't score. But I don't
yeah.
have too much more to say on the soundtrack. As I said, this is a shorter one because this film is just to to,
There's
to put
nothing
into
to say.
perspective. Yeah, to put into perspective how short this is. James Cameron is the box office king. He has 2 of the highest grossing films in history, 2 of the top 5. He may well have 3 of the top 5 or 3 of the top 6 in the next 2 months. I'm not going to get my hopes up in that respect. They never reported the box office numbers for this film. They don't exist. I don't know if this was released at a cinema, if this was a drive-in cinema. I don't, back in the day, you didn't have DVD. I don't, VHS would have been around 82, but I don't
Yeah,
think
or
the VHS
VHS.
was a thing.
What's the other one? Is it Betamax? Whatever it's
Beta,
called.
there's no box office. So how was this film ever viewed and reported? I do not know. So that's going to be a big, big thing for James Cameron because the amount of records attained to his own films, records that he then breaks himself, is a big part of how this conversation is going to go. And as at Oscars, all of his other films, there's going to be, most of his other films, there's going to be talk on Oscars.
Mm,
Could it be all of them except True Lies, maybe off the top of my head? I'm not sure. But obviously, there's nothing in that respect. This does sit on 6% of Rotten Tomatoes, though. And I know that Rotten
yes.
Tomatoes is a sort of broken formula as such, but when
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
that
yeah.
low, it is really worth reading into. But we're going to have a new segment that's going to be a fun one over the course of this series. This is a really weird one to talk about. For those unfamiliar with James Cameron, you may find it hard to track down his films. You may have seen articles. The Abyss is finally going to get a 4K release. The Abyss is finally going to get a Blu-ray release. True Lies is going to have the same. True Lies will have the same. Alien's the same. His films have had the most random of release history. And we're going to have a segment called How Do We Buy It Today? And only just the James Cameron one. But for this, and this surprised me more than anything, this has a Blu-ray release. Now, I understand that he doesn't own the rights to this. He wouldn't have been involved in that Blu-ray release. A lot of
Yeah.
his other films, he is fundamentally in complete creative control of. They won't release without him overseeing it, which is the right way I think film should be remastered. Coppola's done it for The Godfather and Apocalypse Now. Nolan did it for his. Tarantino does. Well, I don't think Tarantino does it for his, but there's a one director I've forgotten who is very involved, and obviously Cameron's done it for Avatar and what is going to be the Titanic. In 1988, there was a director's cut that was released. Now,
Mm.
no one asked for hashtag release the Cameron cut. That didn't exist back then. But apparently, 20 minutes of new footage was used. These 20 minutes were filmed by James Cameron himself. Scenes were completely reordered and they were all re-edited. Now, I don't want to sit here and say I want to watch it. It would make sense to see it for a James Cameron retrospective, but you
Yeah.
cannot get that because it was released on Laserdisc. Um,
Mm.
what are your thoughts on us doing this series, knowing that the edition that is massively and widely available isn't his? Because I understand the flaws and pros, but this inherently, this Piranha 2 is the Blu-ray copy. This is the one that the studio releases still, and it's not the James Cameron one.
It's tough. It is tough. But like at the same time, if it's not being made widely available by himself and he's trying to distance himself from it, then the only available option we have is, the one here. We can't really
Yeah.
complain about it, can we?
Well, that's it. And it's just interesting that you'd think that you've had this guy become one of the most successful directors of all time. Would you not have thought, unless it's him not wanting this cut ever released again on another format?
I just don't think he wants anything to do with the film personally.
No,
Like
and,
otherwise
and
he
and
would have,
that's and that's what makes it so interesting that even though we're like 30 minutes into this review, the film is an enigma still. That there's
Mm,
so little detail about this online that we not that we don't know how to talk about it. there's incredible stories that there should be a documentary on how this film was made, but you're never going to get people involved that are actually there to talk about it. And that's kind of what I'm so perplexed by, is doing this retrospective, looking at his career. This is the messiest review we'll do. This is the messiest film that he's quotation done or hasn't done.
Mm.
And if we segue into the quotation of how is it perceived today, I'm going to be blunt. I think this is a film that pretty much no one knows exists. I couldn't ever tell you that there's a Piranha 2. I bet most 90% of people wouldn't know. And and I'll tell you this, and this is something I've learned from speaking to people, non-film fans. Everyone I know thinks James Cameron directed RoboCop. And I don't know why. The amount of
Really?
people that spoke to me about RoboCop, I thought, yeah, James Cameron did RoboCop. I don't know, he did Terminator, but they thought RoboCop
Mm.
as well. And I
Huh.
can see where they're coming from, the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
80s, the 80s lone absolute unit type thing. But obviously, I'm not going to ask them, hey, do you know about Piranha 2? No, of course they won't. No one's going to have heard of Piranha 2. And I just thought
I
it's a
think,
really fascinating, sorry.
yeah, no, I was going to say, I think it's only kind of perceived today in, like I said, the top 10 lists, random pub quizzes, what was James Cameron's first film and stuff like that. Like, it doesn't really exist outside of that. There's no pop culture, no cult following or anything like that. It's just dead in the water, really.
And I think, I don't want to say it's a shame, but it's one of them where, again, we were lucky to get a director have a career from this. Kind of what I was saying earlier, when he was working on Terminator and he approached Sting, and he had a meeting with Sting, Sting's like, Piranha 2, though. And you can
Mm.
imagine how hard that must be for any, obviously Sting would have had, I think, was the original June out at that point? I can't remember.
Mm.
But, if you're trying to get names involved into these projects, that there's probably a risk for them to do a film from the guy that did Piranha 2. And
Yeah.
I think that's what's been stuck in my mind, that, again, when so few details exist, how do they do it moving forward? And kind of in lieu of that, if we even talk about, normally we have a favorite scene section. I couldn't even give you one, if I'm being honest. I
I have
don't.
one.
Go for it. Go for your one.
And it's the only one that I can really remember start kind of in my mind and stuff like that. It's the scene where the fisherman holds down the hotel and tries to fight back. The only time that anyone tries to fight back against piranhas. I think he kills one and then gets killed by loads. That's the only scene that I remember.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But it was one of them, you knew it was going to happen. It was so telegraphed it was going to happen. And
It was telegraphed, but it was also the only moment in the film where you could kind of go, yeah, it's pretty badass. At least he's trying.
yeah, it's just strange that it's 2 days ago I watched this film, and it just feels like an eternity ago already.
It's already
Um,
slipped my mind. It's already gone
yeah,
completely.
and it's not one I'd ever see again. And at the moment, I'm on a letterbox purge where I've just been doing star ratings on everything I've ever seen, just so my bar's normal. I gave this a 1, and in that respect, it was just like, what a downer to watch. Like, at the end of the year, we can
I'm
obviously watch a
surprised you
better
didn't give it
film.
a half, to be honest.
No, I hate the concept of, like, to me, I don't know. I think the only film I've ever given a half star to is movie 43. And I fundamentally believe that is the worst film I've ever seen in my lifetime. I don't think anything will ever surpass the terribleness of that. And I
Yeah,
think in terms of movie 43, not to divert to a movie 43 review, the biggest crime is all the A-listers in it. That these are all
yeah.
people that can do a good film, and they will lower themselves to it. So
I feel like
maybe
on the
there's another
topic
film.
of movie 43 and Piranha 2 this morning, at some point we should bring back Battle of the Brackets and do a worst film of all time.
I don't know what else to be there. I've seen some terrible films,
There's
but
some
it was
bad
it
films out
was
there.
interesting going through every film I've ever seen and clicking and thought, what would I give this? There were some atrocious ones, some genuinely atrocious ones. Ones I'd forgotten I'd seen, and some that some I thought, yeah, that was bad as I thought, because then you put
Mm,
it in comparison to others. But Piranha 2 is low down, and this is it. This is how I am with the sort of worst list on the side point, that when it gets worst film of the year, stuff like that. There are
yeah,
fundamentally so many dozens of films that we'll never see that are the worst, and they're so bad they've never been bought by a PR company to advertise. They've never been released en masse to the public. Not those straight to DVD type things, but there'll be worse ones than that. And an intriguing concept, stuff like this. And to me, Piranha 2's there, and I wouldn't even say Piranha will ever reach its own word of cult. It is
no,
literally, if this wasn't James Cameron, who went on to have an incredible career, no one would probably have ever brought Piranha. And maybe I'm overthinking things by, maybe if James Cameron had a big career, Piranha wouldn't have been rebooted. Maybe it was his name on the sequel that led to it being rebooted in the late noughties.
maybe.
I mean,
I
it's still a
mean,
long time since
the
Titanic.
first film was kind of the first film. I think has a little bit of a cult following to it. So
Yeah, and I can see why. Like, I remember that was like you had to have been the right age at the right year to have seen
yeah.
that kind of film. I feel like there were loads like that you went through this patch in the late noughties of like loads of like horror films being
Oh no, I'm
rebooted.
talking about the original Piranha. I
Oh yeah,
think
the
has a cult
original
following. Yeah,
Piranha
yeah.
Piranha. The original Piranha does, but again, no one's talking about the sequel except for the James Cameron thing, and
No.
it's genuinely fascinating. But if we head into our final thoughts, which is safe to assume at this point in time, you know, we're not going to be doing a big top 10 ranking because he's not done 10 films or anything like that. But Piranha 2 is fundamentally one of the worst ones I've seen this year, easily. Probably one of the worst ones I've seen. But the problem is, it's me. I want to watch this director's career. And I guess what works for James Cameron, right? You start at the lowest point of his career, which is the beginning. And from that point on, it is only going to go upwards, which is a real blessing to how the next few weeks are going to go and hopefully how the video is going to go.
Exactly. Yes, it's only up from here. I've already seen or rewatched Terminator, ready for the review, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting through all the films. It's going to be exciting.
Definitely. And with that being said, please do comment your thoughts on Piranha 2 The Spawning. Let us know if you've seen this film. If you haven't, are you going to watch it now? That would be the real surprise if you've listened to this and still chosen to watch it. I would respect the commitment to a director's retrospective if not. But as I said, let us know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, maybe you're a fan of James Cameron, maybe you actually love Piranha 2, please do consider hitting the subscribe button. We've got a lot more films coming on the way. As we said, we've got the James Cameron Retrospective, which is going in pretty deep at the moment. We will be back next Wednesday, the 11th of January. I didn't even mean to say we'll be back, but of course it is the Terminator. We've got Reese joining us for that one, who I'm excited to talk about when we get the chance. And obviously, it's his, some claim it's his first feature film. Maybe it's his second feature film, but we'll be back. We'll have stuff to talk about. We've done some more research. I've seen behind the scenes how the ideas came to be. It's the Terminator. It's going to be a fun one, and I cannot wait to talk about that. So do get us on there and Tayte, what is the best place for people to find us for any of the videos that we've got coming up?
You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy. Those are the best places to find us to find out details from future videos and stuff like that. You can find us on Facebook and Letterboxd. Just type in Cinema Savvy or go into link in the description. And of course, you can go onto our Redbubble store where you can pick up a jumper, t-shirt, cushion, whatever you want in the world, just with our face and name on it.
Definitely. So everybody, please do that. As I said, this has been the first video of this new series. It's going to be with us for a few more weeks. We're heading into a new year. A lot of things happening. A lot of series, a lot of announcements, a lot of new reviews, discussions. We've had home media stuff in the last few months as well. Anything and everything that will happen will be reported on here. So go find us on their social medias. It's going to be a fun one, and we look forward to seeing on some more. So take care. See you then.